Hi, good day everyone. My name is MNLP Gamay, a student of Dr. Mabunga in his subject Ed 802 or Education and Development. By the way, I'm taking PhD in Education Leadership and Management. And for today, I am tasked to report about Global Multidimensional Index. So I will begin my report by asking this question. What is the Global MPI? So here, the global MPI was first developed in 2010 by the United Nations Development Programme or UNDP and the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative or OPHI and at the University of Oxford for the UNDP flagship publication or Human Development Report. The global MPI is updated at least once per year to include newly released data. Global MPI has this, I think, motto. So we have motivations for moving towards multi-dimensional poverty measure. And we have here a quote saying that poor people's lives can be battered by multiple deprivations that are each of independent importance. And that is according to Amartya Sen, 1992. Okay, let's move on. What can a meaningful multi-dimensional measure do? So we have here. So first, provide an overview of multiple indicators at a glance. Second, it show progress quickly and directly. So serves for monitoring and evaluation. And number three, we have informed planning and policy design. And four, target poor people and communities. And number five, reflect people owns understanding and flexible and of course high resolution. All right, so it could be zoom in details for regions, groups, or dimensions. What is new in 2018? In 2018, OPHI and UNDP undertook a joint revision of the global MPI, drawing upon and subsuming the best of the previous MPI by adjusting five of its 10 indicators to better align the global MPI with SDGs. So, as we know that SDG stands for the Sustainable Development Goal. So the result from this year covered 100 plus countries and is disaggregated by over 1,000 sub-national regions as well as by rural or urban areas and age groups, making it particularly useful in identifying people who are left behind in multiple SDGs. Right, so in the article that Dr. Mabung have shared to us, okay, it's entitled The New Global MPI 2018, Aligning with the Sustainable Development Goals, and was written by Sabina Curie and Salim Jahan. What is that all about? So in that paper, early in 2018, the United Nations Development Programme Human Development Report Office and the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative OPHI agreed to adjust and unify their methodologies on poverty measurement and consider indicator improvements in order to better monitor the Sustainable Development Goals or SDGs. So, in their paper, this sets out the specification of a joint global multidimensional poverty index first published in 2018, which is an internationally nationally comparable measure of acute poverty that captures the multiple deprivations poor people experiences with respect to health, education, and living standards. All right. So the best features of both of these are subsumed in the Joint Global MPI 2018, which also reflects new data, possibilities to better align to the global MPI to the Sustainable Development Goals. Because the objective of revising the MPI to create a more credible that enables comparisons across countries using existing data was challenging to realize that the paper sets out five key principles for a global poverty measure related to number one, data coverage, second, communicability, third, comparability, number four, disaggregation, and five, robustness. And also in that paper, she had this principle of selection, The objective of creating a credible and legitimate measure of multidimensional poverty that added value to the new generation of national MPIs by enabling comparisons across countries in a transparent way, while making the best use of existing data was challenging to realize. It proved helpful to establish a set of core principles to guide the process of revising the indicators and specifications of the 2018 Global MPI. In particular, the following principles govern present revision. So, number one, coverage. The coverage indicators are to be present for at least 75 countries and 3.5 billion people. Second, the global MPI must be compelling. It must be intuitive and easy to understand. Third, the global MPI seeks comparability across countries by A. Minimizing the inclusion of indicators with different meanings across the universe, and B. Justifying and making clear existing non-comparabilities. For number four, we have disaggregation. Disaggregation by subnational regions and ages to be presented insofar as possible. And last, MPI comparisons are to be robust to a range of weights and poverty cutoffs. So a while ago, we were talking about the SDG or the Sustainable Development Goals. And as we all know, one of the major goal that they set is to end poverty. The UN's global goals aim to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity for everyone by 2030. At Site Savers, we make sure all our work helps to achieve these goals. So we're hoping that those goals will be achieved at 2030. Presented here are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals or SDG as our shared vision of humanity and a social contract between the world's leaders and the people. UN Secretary Ban Ki-moon said of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and other top leaders at the summit at UN headquarters in New York in September. So as you can see, number one of the goals that they need to achieve is first no poverty at yun ang pinaka number one. Okay, so we do have 17 goals, and we're hoping that this could be achieved by the year 2030. Okay, the question is that why multidimensional poverty index? Why do you use multidimensional? In one study, monetary poverty measured just one dimension of being poor. So in Rwanda, specifically, based on whether expenditure per adult equivalent is below a poverty line, based on monetary poverty. Other dimensions of poverty should be included like education, health, housing, and should be taken into account for a full understanding of the phenomenon. And it can be quantified with a multi-dimensional poverty index, or it has a formula using for interpretation of data. And with the help of the United Nations Development Program, Human Development Report Office or UNDP, HDRO, as well as Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative or OPHI. Alright, let's know also the history of MPI. So in the year 2010, the first global MPI was published. In the year 2012, Rwanda's first MPI using population census data. And in the year 2018, okay, Rwanda's first MODA. So the MODA stands for the Multiple Overlapping Deprivation Analysis using DHS. DHS stands for Demographic and Health Survey, of course, and DHS V 2014-15 data. And in the year 2019, okay, MPI and MODA now use EIC V345 data. So the EIC V stands for each of the integrated household and living conditions surveys. Okay, since they aim to measure poverty, so they have these methods. So MPI uses Alkire and Foster method. The unit of identification is the household. All members get same score, 4 dimensions, and 14 indicators. For the MODA, tailors indicators to age. So unit of identification is the child, and 5 dimensions and 11 indicators. So later on, I'll be showing to you what are these cutoffs, okay, and indicators. So the table that I presented here, the dimension, showing the dimension indicators, deprivation cutoffs, and weights of the new global MPIs. Okay, so as you can see here, so we have dimensions of poverty, we have health, education, and standard living. So under health, we have two indicators. So these are nutrition and child mortality. So they will consider deprived if any adult under 70 years of age or any child for whom there is nutritional information is undernourished. So, and child mortality, any child has died in the family in the 5-year period preceding the survey. So the weight will be 1616. And for the next dimension of poverty is education. So we have two indicators, the years of schooling and first the school attendance. Now, in the year of schooling, no household member aged 10 years or older has completed 6 years of schooling. So if they have that case, so I mean say they are deprived. They are deprived. And in the school attendance, they will be deprived if any school age child is not attending school up to age at which he or she would complete class 8. So taking the weight, so it's still 1 over 6, 1 over 6. And the third dimensions of poverty, we have the living standards or standard of living. And we have indicators, cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, assets. Again, we have cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, and assets. So, of course, there are also indicators to be considered that they are deprived. So, for the cooking fuel, they will be deprived if the household cook with tongue. Sanitation, the household sanitation facility is not improved. And drinking water, if the household does not have access to improved drinking water according to SDG guidelines or safe drinking water, at least a 30-minute walk from home round trip. For electricity, they will be deprived if the household has no electricity. And for housing, at least one of the three housing materials for roof, walls, and floor are inadequate. Right? So, and for assets, the households does not own more than one of these assets like radio, TV, telephone, computer, animal cart, bicycle, motorbike, refrigerator, and does not own car or truck. Okay, so as you can see, if we're going to count the indicators, okay, going back. So as a summary, so we have here, we have three dimensions of poverty. We have health, education, as well as living standards, but we do have 10 indicators. So that those 10 indicators, we have nutrition, child mortality, year schooling, school attendance, cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, and assets. Right. So a while ago I mentioned about the method. So that's Alcar Foster AF method that first used for MPI. So the functions, that first one, it select dimensions, indicators, and weights, or the flexibility. And number two, it set deprivation cutoffs for each indicator. So in the table that I've shown a while ago, so it also shows deprivation. And number three, apply to indicators for each person from same survey. And number four, set a poverty cutoff to identify who is poor. And number five, calculate adjusted head count ratio for ordinal data such as the MDG indicator. So how to construct the MPI? First, depict dimensions of deprivations. Fourth, like personal education, housing, public services, social services, and economic activities. And number two, they will identify indicators for each dimension. So 14 in total. And then, for example, here, number of children age 7 to 15 at school. Number three, they set cutoffs, the poverty lines, to measure deprivation. Example, at least one child age 7 to 15 at that school. Number four, select weights for each dimension. So an indicator, so 1 over 6, that's why if you can see the table, each has weight. Number 5, count weighted deprivation per person. And for number 6, after all of those things, they can now define poor. Okay, for example, deprive on at least 40% of the total dimensions. And number 7, they measure poverty by using that formula. MPI is equal to H times A. So where H is number of persons who are poor, or the head count, and A is the average proportion of deprivations per poor person. All right, so that is the formula in calculating the MPI, but that formula will give us the incidence or the head count ratio, the percentage of people who are poor, and the second, the A stands for the average share of dimensions proportions of weighted deprivations. People suffer at the same time, right? So let's move. So as a summary in the global MPI 2018, so they come up with this. This will be the summary of the study. So again, as I mentioned a while ago, we have 3 dimensions of poverty. So we have health, education, and living standards. And under that, there are indicators per dimension. So for health, it's very clear that, of course, nutrition and child mortality belongs to health dimension. And for education, we have years of schooling and school attendance. And for the living standards, they have 6 indicators. Again, cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, and assets. After all the methods used, they can now identify who is poor. For example here, a person is multidimensional poor. So take the word multidimensional poor because they considered other dimensions for a person to be considered poor. Okay, a person is multidimensional poor if she is deprived in 1/3 of the weighted indicators. So deprived 1/3 of the weighted indicators. For example here, so as you can see here, so a lot of deprivations happen. So Grace is deprived in, so the arrows, of course, nutrition, okay, and of course the living standards. So she's deprived for that population at present. So another thing, 14-year-old Amotha, India, okay, a person who is deprived in 1/3 or more the weighted indicators is MPI poor. So Amotha is poor. It's because Amotha is poor because she and her family are deprived in more than 1/3 of the MPI weighted indicators. So as you can see in the picture, so the arrow, that arrow would tell us that those are her deprivation. So Amutha lack nutrition, okay, although she has education, but in the other aspect of dimension, living standards, she lack cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, and assets. So she lacks that dimension. So more than 1/3, I guess. So because nutrition and of course living standards, so she lack those components. So that's why she can be classified as, or her MPI is poor. All right. So in relation to the global MPI, so of course one of the result of that study came with the policy issues. Right? So just like Rwanda has a young population and rapid GDP growth, and it opens possibility of prioritizing children and basic needs protected rights. And of course, their goal is to break the cycle of intergenerational poverty. And lastly, these are the goals of MPI. Number 1, it monitors progress in social and standard of living indicators. Second, it helps design programs that accurately target the poor. And third, it helps evaluate projects designed to reduce poverty. And last, it compare areas in terms of poverty and progress. And that ends my report. So thank you for listening, and I hope that you have learned something from the topic I presented.